Hello there, Brick Fanatics. It is time for one of the highlights of my calendar, an opportunity to show off one of the incredible builds from the latest series of the Bricklink Designer Program. This is Outlaw Forest Den by fan designer Brickhammer, which will go on sale on the 6th of October for pre-order. Just as an explanation of how the Bricklink Designer Program works, these are crowd-funded models. If you want to get hold of one, they will be made in very limited supplies. I can't give you a specific number on these because the numbers are changing around a little bit, more on that in a second. But what I do know is that typically the castle builds tend to sell out very, very quickly. So you will pre-order the set and then a little later down the line you will actually pay for the thing and the Lego group will ship it to you. If you want to get hold of this thing, pre-ordering is the only option. You will not be able to buy this thing in Lego stores. Just as a rundown for those who might be coming to this for the first time, the Bricklink Designer Program is similar to the LEGO Ideas theme in that fans submit their own designs for consideration as an official LEGO set. Where these differ is that with the LEGO Ideas Program, those sets will be tweaked and adapted and modified by actual LEGO designers working at the LEGO group, and then will go out to absolutely everybody in stores around the world, whereas these things are limited run, only available in very small quantities, and are more or less exactly what the designer has in mind for the set. If you're looking at the timing of this video and thinking, wow, this is a particularly long review, I have tagged onto the end the entire presentation that Alex Kastelic of the Bricklink Designer Program made at LEGO Fan Media Days last week, so that you'll be able to see absolutely everything that was said there in explaining the program a little bit more and explaining how they go about choosing which fan designs get selected and then how those are adapted and changed before the official release. We're just going to talk about this build in the first part of the video, but I did also have the opportunity to see some of the other works in progress sets which are not quite ready yet but getting a little bit closer to their finished form. You'll be able to see some footage of those here. That's basically all I was able to get because the day was very, very busy and I didn't have nearly enough time to spend photographing and filming all of these sets. They are really, really neat, all of them, though. I can definitely say that in person they have quite a presence. You're not going to be disappointed with any of these. Now, for Series 6 of the Bricklink Designer Program, there are 5 sets that you can potentially purchase. They are Off-Road Adventure by King Creations, The Art Factory by Brickster, Gold Mine Expedition by Brick Project, Outlaw Forest Den, this one by Brickhammer, and Sequoia Tree Trail by Peace on Earth. I don't think you're going to be disappointed by any of these sets. Having seen them in person, they're all absolutely wonderful. Each of them is going to give you a slightly different build experience, and that's the thing that I really love about the Bricklink Designer Program, which is each of these sets have so much of the character and design choices from the original fan designer, so each of these feel more distinct than I would say a LEGO set that is typically, the edges are sanded off of a lot of LEGO products to make them as easy as possible for fans around the world to be able to put together. These ones are these specialist items. They are built by fans. They are a little bit more tricky to put together in some cases. I mean, it does depend on the build and the building techniques that are used and what the fan designer has intended to create with these, but certainly I wouldn't necessarily recommend these sets for someone dipping their toes into the LEGO water for the first time, but that's generally fine because these sets are so difficult to get hold of because of that pre-ordering structure that it's very unlikely that somebody who doesn't know their way around the LEGO brick is going to be getting hold of these. Now, in a community poll a while ago, we asked which of these sets you would be most interested in seeing us review. This one, along with Goldmine Expedition, were the top picks. I was a little bit apprehensive about reviewing this set because it is a castle and because, generally speaking, the people who want the LEGO castles from the Bricklink Designer Program already know months in advance that they're going to buy one, so I wasn't sure what I was going to be able to add with a review. The castles sell out incredibly quickly because they are the most in demand of all of these sets. I've had a castle set from the Bricklink Designer Program previously, the Medieval Seaside Market by Brickfan Oi, which is absolutely brilliant in its own right. And coming to a second castle, I wasn't really sure, will I have enough unique things to say about this? Turns out this couldn't be more different from that build, where that one feels a lot more like it's trying to continue on what we see in something like Lion Knight's Castle. This one feels very much its own thing and is significantly more complicated to put together, I would say, way, but then the payoff for that is absolutely wonderful. So right up top, you may be able to tell this is not called a Wolfpack set, but this is basically the Wolfpack. The Wolfpack being one of those classic Lego castle factions that has been revitalized in recent years, brought back for the nostalgia crowd, both in collectible minifigure form and in one of the Lego castle sets that we've had from the Icons theme. As such, a bunch of fans submitting to the Bricklink Designer Program have attempted to make their own Wolfpack sets, and some of these have ended up being more popular than others. I want to look at why this one in particular was the right choice for the Bricklink Designer Program. Now, apparently the way that they choose these is basically a popularity contest. This is the one that most fans wanted, and so if you voted for this one, you made a good choice because this is a really well built castle. From a build perspective, I did struggle with this one a little bit more than I have with the past few Bricklink Designer Program sets that I've had. Initially, when I had the Ominous Isle for review, I said that that one is a brilliant set, but that fans should know what they're getting into with that because it is quite a challenging thing to put together. It uses a lot of techniques that you wouldn't normally see with a Lego set, and then it can be quite fragile as a result of that. And for the first time in a while, I felt the same kind of thing with this one, where it is a little bit fragile in places, especially a lot of the foliage, which keeps pinging off, and I'm having a hard time putting it all back. So if you look at this and you think, oh, there's one particular leaf that's out of place or one particular plant that's growing in the wrong spot, that is the reason why. It's because I've been trying to put these things back on as they pop off. But beyond that, once you are actually building the thing, I found it quite a zen experience of putting layers upon layers of terrain on top of each other in order to build up this giant structure. And so I did quite enjoy the build experience, even if I did find it a little bit more challenging than I have the previous few Bricklink Designer Program sets that I've had. What's really interesting is, right, this tower here is the last thing that you build. That comes off entirely. So you put this whole thing together and you're building up terrain, and you're putting in the minifigures as you go as well. They're coming out in the bags. And then finally, right at the end of the build, you build the nostalgia piece. Normally with a nostalgic Lego set, the nostalgia is right up front and center. You see it immediately as you're putting the set together and you're like, oh, I'm building the Galaxy Explorer or the Blacktron Renegade or something like that. With this one, you start with all of the more modern stuff, the things from this build that feel a little bit more like they are 2025, and then you end it by traveling back to the 90s with this brilliant tower with the black and the grey, which is that classic iconic Wolfpack colour. And so it's a fascinating payoff here where you suddenly get hit by nostalgia right at the end of the build for the capstone of the entire experience. That's not normally the way that I would say nostalgic Lego sets go. I think that makes this very unique as a building experience. Before I talk about the castle itself, I wanted to highlight the minifigures. What I find fascinating about the minifigures in this set is that these are the best minifigures that I have ever seen from a Bricklink Designer Program set thus far. And now admittedly, that's not the highest of high bars. I'm not saying that the minifigures in the previous builds that I've had have been in any way lacking. It's just that because these are using stock elements that are already part of the Lego palette, that are not adding additional printing or what have you, it's normally very difficult to make these things stand out. Each and every one of these Wolfpack members in this set has got either dual molded legs or printed legs, which make them all feel like they are of a much higher quality than certain other Lego sets that I could name, which are going out to a much wider audience. The fact that these little additions have been added just mean that this feels like a more premium experience. I see this all over the place with the Bricklink Designer Program in general, which is that it feels like the designers are allowed to be very extra. They are allowed to put in an extra level of detail and just throw in a lot of elements very generously that you would usually see used a little bit more sparingly in Lego sets that go out to a wider audience. Beyond that, the way that these minifigures have been put together, they all feel like unique and interesting characters in their own right. A lot has been done here to give them unique weapons, unique accessories. Some of them have got bags, some of them have got like fluffy, fleecy hoods to them. Some trees fall down while you're talking about a Lego set. This is on a hinge, that's not me breaking it. Each of them have something that make them stand out, and some of them are really inventive. I love like the ninja ninja wolf pack here, which is one of my absolute favorites. I like the way that the blacksmith legs have been used to give a kind of an apron or like a longer flowing robe kind of look to the wolf pack. It's very, very clever. And then of course you get a couple of the wolves from the collectible minifigures as well, and then you get a couple of lion knights, and these knights are probably the least interesting of the minifigures just because we've had a bunch of lion knights in the past already, but each of these have got their own little charm to them as well. I like the way that this has all been put together. I feel like the characters in this set really stand out, which is something that you want from a set which is essentially built around that Wolfpack torso. But okay, that's the minifigures. Let's talk about the build itself, because this is an absolutely fantastic castle set. As I mentioned, this is a lot more detailed but also a lot more flimsy than Medieval Seaside Market. It calls to mind something like Ominous Isle, I think, in the way that a lot of this terrain is designed, although not quite as fragile as that build, which uses a lot of hot dog elements that can very easily ping off and get lost. What I find is really clever about this is how many different ways you can kind of peek into the set. There's a lot of extra little details that are hidden away. And you've got the fact that it opens up, if I do this, whoa, so we can have a look inside, and that is great. And there's a lot of really cool detail on the inside here, but maybe you don't want to open the entire thing up. Maybe you just want to have a little peeky hole. There's just a little peeky hole here instead, and this kind of idea is all through this build, where you've got little ways of just looking inside, which are really clever and inventive. In practice, this means that this works both as a large display model that is all sealed up and closed if you want something that's going to be atmospheric and have that 360 design to it, but also you can open it up dollhouse-like, you can explore inside, you can find all of these little nooks and crannies that are filled with extra little charm. I love some of the little tiny details that have gone into this, whether it's a little mouse with some cheese, whether it's a really cool little bedroom here. You've got this brilliant sticker up here, which is kind of difficult to see, especially in all the black area like this where there's not much lighting, but there's a brilliant map in there of, I guess, the castle world, and then you've got a few different castle sets that are represented there. Really, just the attention to detail here is fabulous. And even if you take something relatively small like this little cart here, there's a cart in a variety of different castle builds, because there's always a little cart of some kind. This one comes with two little barrels and a chest. There's nothing in the chest. Oh dear, unfortunate. But if I take that off and if I then lift this up, there is... I'm having a hard time getting this to lift up for me. It is quite snug, but I can get it to lift up, and inside there's another secret treasure chest hiding underneath. And now that one doesn't have anything in it either, but just the idea that that is there as something that you can get out, it just adds a bunch of extra play options for this Lego set, which is really, really neat. I feel like as an actual play set, this thing is probably not going to last very well. I can imagine a lot of things, especially that foliage, just getting lost with wear and tear over time, but certainly as a display piece, this is absolutely fantastic. Now, as said, I wouldn't necessarily recommend this if this is your first castle, or if it's the first castle for a while, if you remember Wolfpack fondly from the 90s, but you've not really done any Lego in a while since, and this is your first attempt at getting back into Lego. I feel like maybe this might not be the right starting point for you, because it is quite a complicated build. It does require a little bit more familiarity with the Lego system and how things normally go together. That said, if you're the kind of person who's considering this Lego set, you're probably not an absolute novice. You're probably fairly familiar with Lego anyway, and as said, because of how quickly these things sell out, you are probably only going to get hold of this thing if you are an uber fan. And if you are an uber fan, you are definitely not going to be disappointed. This is going to be an incredibly satisfying set to put together. This is going to be so much fun. You are going to have a good time. Now, with regards to the actual pre-ordering experience of getting hold of this set, you get it from the Bricklink website. That then takes you to the Lego website where you make your purchase. You don't get charged immediately. You get charged when they're actually ready to send it out to you. And apparently, according to, well, you'll see this at the end of the video, but according to the Bricklink team, it is very uncommon for somebody to say, oh, I did want that set, but now I've changed my mind and I'm not going to get it. So they very rarely have pre-orders cancelled on them. That's not a surprise. If you're pre-ordering something that is several £100s, you probably actually know that you want to get it. With this pre-order, typically there have been 30,000 1,000 of these that have gone up for sale, and those castle ones do sell out very, very quickly within a few hours. The new rule that they have established is they can't play with the total number of sets that are available across all of the Bricklink Designer program, but they can play with how they allocate those numbers. So if there's one set that's maybe not selling quite as well, and then the castle is selling very, very quickly, they can move some of the units from one over to another one. Apparently there are a few little technical hiccups along the way with that. Certainly with the last time that they did this, they had a little graphic on the screen, on the computer screen, that would tell you how many units were left, and that was thrown completely out of whack by this reallocating of units. So just bear in mind that there will be potentially some bugs along the way. Apparently they've been working to fix some of that and make it a little bit more streamlined this time around, but the good news in all of that is it is less likely for this thing to sell out within 2 or 3 hours. However, if it is something that you want to get your hands on, I do recommend you getting on it sooner rather than later. This is not to encourage FOMO, but really there is a danger of you missing out if you do not grab it as soon as you possibly can. As said, I have seen all of these in person. They all look absolutely wonderful, no matter what kind of set, no matter what size. You're going to get something really, really neat here. Even the relatively small ones do look absolutely spectacular. So you're not going to be disappointed by any of these, I would say. Just, I can talk about this one from a building perspective in a way that I can't talk about the others. And that building experience is really, really neat, if a little bit more challenging in some places than some of the other Bricklink sets that I've had. And as said, it looks like the Series 7 and Series 8 sets, which are currently being finessed and just modified a little bit, that process appears to be going very well because those sets look absolutely incredible as well. These pictures here you're seeing of the Series 7 sets, those are not quite done yet. Those are kind of a midway between the initial fan design that was voted on and the finished design, which we will be seeing at the start of next year. But just even in this transitional stage, these look really, really neat. The Series 8 sets here, those are the original fan designs. Those have not yet been modified. Those are going to be going through this process. It takes a while to take a set from that fan vote design all the way through to the finished model that you finally see, and it looks like that time is well spent with all of these. Anyway, hopefully that gives you some insight into this Lego set and whether or not it's going to be the right one for you when pre-orders open, although I imagine you've probably already long since made that decision. As said, I'm going to leave you with Alex Kostelik's entire presentation to Fan Media Days, wherein he went through a lot of different details of the Bricklink Designer program and had a Q&A session and answered a few questions that people have. If you do have questions, I do find that the Bricklink team are quite open and available. They like to be at various different events. They like to be able to communicate this stuff out to people, and so I would genuinely recommend checking out online what you can find. There's various different forums. They do regular web seminars so that they can explain a lot of these things. There are options to have your questions answered, and if that is something that you need, I would definitely recommend looking for those opportunities, because the team does seem genuinely very approachable and friendly and very eager to offer up information. Anyway, thank you very much for watching. I'm going to skip the regular outro because this video is going to continue for a very long time now. Anyway, down in the description there will be a link to the Bricklink website to where you need to go for when pre-orders open. Otherwise, take it away, Alex.
All right, hello everyone. So for those of you that do not know who I am, my name's Alex Kostelik. I'm the lead for the Bricklink Designer program. I've been with the LEGO group now for about 3 years. Originally came from the fan community. I was part of OC-Lug in Southern California. I'm based out of the Bricklink office in Irvine, California. So what we have for you today are Bricklink Series 6 for the BDP Bricklink Designer Program Series. So it's been probably about 3 years now, so it's been moving pretty quickly. Time flies. We have about 15 models per year that we're working on. So at any given moment, we have 5 or 6 series in active development. So a lot of exciting things going on at all times. So, there's a lot of different things that have been changing with this program over the years, and so I kind of wanted to talk through, give you a little bit of what the program is, the purpose of the program, talk about some of the things that we've been changing over the last couple of years, and then we'll take some time to kind of go through some of the models. And then we also have in another room prototype models for Series 7 and 8 as well. So you'll be able to see those in person. So right now we're averaging right around 350 to 400 submissions per series, which is quite healthy. If we get any more than that, then it becomes quite a lot or tedious to kind of go through all of those models. in such a short period from the voting standpoint. So right now we say the program is very healthy. We have a lot of active fan designers. We're seeing roughly 30-40% new designers each series, which is great. One thing is, because these models are fully generated in the sense that you have building instructions that are submitted with the models, it's a lot of work, right? We're adults, we have careers and jobs and families and all that kind of thing, so we can't expect that we're going to have all of those designers returning from series to series. One of the things that we've changed over the times has been the ability to resubmit models. So previously you used to only be able to submit a model twice. Now, as long as you're making changes to the model and adapting the model based off of feedback from the fan community or from internal from the Lego model designers, then you're able to keep submitting it. So what you'll see is that there have been actually some models that have been submitted maybe up to as many as 5 times. For example, the Privateer Frigate Fortuna in Series 7 was submitted 5 times before it was selected as finalist, which is great to see. A lot of development on models over time. To touch on the finalist selection process, because this is something that we get a lot of questions on. So everything that we do is purely based off of the fan vote. So the highest amount of votes is a set that's going to have the first right of refusal for being selected as a finalist. We always have to go through and double check and make sure that there isn't anything that is too overly unstable in a model, or there's something that can't be built. We haven't really had any or many cases of that. Probably the most notable would have been Brick Cross in Series 1. It would have been it was going to be a backup finalist, but there were some issues with the roof and the top of the building that prevented that we didn't know how we were going to correct it, because there were a lot of illegal techniques for how it was all held together. But we messaged that to the designer after the series, and then lo and behold, it did really well again in Series 2, and then was selected again as a finalist. So it's a bit rare that that happens, but that is something that could potentially happen. The other thing is there might be something already in development in the product catalog, and so then we'll avoid that as well. But otherwise, we'll go through and select 5 finalists based off of diversity of theme and size. So we have an average of 2,500 elements across each of the models. So generally that ends up being maybe a couple larger sets over 3,000 parts, maybe 2 or 3 sets in the 2,000 to 3,000 part range, and then a smaller set. Some series you might get all medium-sized sets, just depends on the voting. Some series you might get a couple smaller sets and a couple larger sets. So you'll see it varies from time to time. But what ends up happening is you end up seeing, you might see the top 10 models. Castle's extremely popular. So we typically see maybe 30 out of the top 50 are Castle models. So therefore, you're not going to see the top 5 models being selected as finalists are all 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, right? You might see 1, 10, 12, 26, 36 in voting. And that's because it'll be the highest category, or the highest voted in that category, or in the next available category. So if the top 5 models are all Castle, then the next model that we'll look at will take the first Castle set, then take the second set that's after that, which might be it's a train set or something like that. That might be the 6th highest voted. So we work our way down the list. And so that's where we see a lot of people asking questions around like, well, how did that model get selected? These other models had more comments or votes or things like that. And that's why, because we'll only select 1 model for each theme. Now there are certain things like the categories that are on the website, we don't fully go off of those, like space, sci-fi, fantasy are all kind of grouped together. That's just for ease of voting. It's not because we're not going to select, for example, like Series 5, we had Adventure in Transylvania, which would have been a fantasy-based set because it's Dracula's mansion. We also did Mushroom Village. They're 2 completely different kind of sci-fi or fantasy things. Smaller sets too, we're not going to block them based on, oh, this is a small building or a small nature set. For example, like Off-Road Adventure and Sequoia Tree Trail. They're 2 completely kind of different things. So, but what we've learned from Series 1 and the crowdfunding of Series 1 is that we try to keep all of the models exactly how the fan designer had designed it. We always defer to the fan designer for any changes that need to be made for any kind of stability issue, or any stability issues, legal techniques, things that need to be changed. We'll always let the fan designer drive that, right? So it's still their model. But we are starting to make more changes because we've heard, based on feedback, more minifigures, want more detail. Sometimes the inside of a model isn't fully fleshed out. And so we'll take some time to make some of those changes. So things you might see, for example, on Sequoia Tree Trail, one of the things that we were initially worried about is these tall trees are inherently going to have a lot of leverage on the bottom of the model. So if you ever wanted to move it around, that's going to be kind of a challenge, right? So one of the design changes that we made was that you can lift the trees off. And then they are stable, so when you put them down, they're fine. So it's easy to move. So that's kind of a good example of where we'll step in and kind of provide some guidance on, here's something that you might want to think about, and that'll result in a better model. But at the end of the day, it's still the fan designer going through and making kind of the aesthetic changes for the model. So if you ever see something that changes, for example, I know there was a lot of questions around gold mine and some of the trees that were built with the model. A lot of the challenge with foliage and trees are that they work really well in digital. Then when you brick build them, they fall apart. They're too tedious to put together. And in this specific case, one of the biggest challenges we had with this model was the trees actually prevented you from lifting off the individual sections. So there wasn't actually a way to lift the top off without hitting the trees and having to pull those off. So sometimes we have to make functional and slight changes for that. So as we go through the refinement process, it's a year and 5 months from taking a model from when it's submitted to when it's actually shipped to the customer. So during that time, for the first couple months, what we're doing is working with the fan designer to make those changes, but then we're also getting ready for production. Production is a majority of the time that we are working on the models. So it's getting ready to manufacture the elements and then getting ready for the actual assembly of the sets, ready to be shipped out to customers. So in preparation for crowdfunding will always happen. We will always release pricing 1 month before crowdfunding happens. So for example, crowdfunding for this series, Series 6, is October 6th. We would release the final set images and the photos at the beginning of September. So it's always the first business day of September. So it was September 2nd, I think, is when everything went live. But we'll send everything out, and then one of the fun things that we do is, since these are pre-production, we are also sending out review sets to fan media. So a handful of you are also receiving review sets. The interesting thing, I'm sure, is you see that they are very different when you receive them because they are what we would call a volume sample. They are pre-production, so they actually haven't been physically manufactured. They're hand-picked, individually bagged, like you would receive, but they're pre-production models with prototype stickers, etc. So if you're interested in participating in that, let me know. Please reach out to me, talk to me afterwards, or send me an email, and we can get you on the list to do that as well. We are limited, so we will rotate in who we're working with, just because we are limited to between 15 and 18 sets because they are all hand-picked. We don't have the ability to do more than that. We would love to, but it's purely it's a lot of labor to do that. So, but we send these out for review so that you're able to get a good idea of what these models look like, because pictures can't justify all of the wonderful features that are built into each of the models. So, then we get into crowdfunding, and there's been a lot of changes with crowdfunding over the last 4 months. Series 5, we introduced what we call real-time production allocation. So one of the challenges we've had over the last handful of series is that a handful of models will sell out very quickly, and for the fans that are following along for a year and want a specific model, we launch globally all at the exact same time. It's not tiered based on the geography that you're located in. And so for some of our fans and friends, they're in places like Australia and the Pacific, where it's very early in the morning, 1 or 2 a.m. Sorry, Jay. And so what happens is maybe a set's sold out in 3 hours, and you've been following along for a year, and now you can no longer get that set. So one of the things that we looked at is we have a very specific production slot that we are allowed to have, or for each specific series. And so we can't extend it by any way. So we said, all right, well, what if we move around, or if in real time we can look and see if a set is going to be selling maybe more towards the 10 to 15,000 set range, which is where we would expect a original theme to sell, it's very difficult to compare the performance of a completely original model compared to a classic or pirate set because they have a built-in fan base already, right? So if we have the maximum of 30,000 sets available for each set, well then there's 20,000 sets that maybe are going unproduced per se. So what we can do is in real time look and see if a set's trending towards 15,000. We know a majority of sales happen in the first 36 hours and the last 24 hours of the crowdfunding period. So we can shorten that crowdfunding window, which allows us more flexibility with our production team to get things ready if something jumps from maybe 30,000 to 50,000. There's a little bit extra planning that needs to go into that. So what we can do is, for example, what you saw with Adventure in Transylvania, we moved that up to 50,000 because we saw some of the other models weren't selling to that 30,000 mark. We guarantee that we will make 30,000 sets if a set sells up that much. So each of the finalist models have the ability to sell up to 30,000 still, but that top cap up to 50,000 is dependent totally on the performance of the other models and where they're at. So you could have a series where it's 30, 30, 30, 30 all the way across. You could have one that's maybe going up to the limit of 50, 3 at 30, and 1 at 15. Or no, sorry, 10. So whatever kind of that number is. And there's a little bit of flexibility in that. But that kind of gives you an idea of what we're trying to do with that. The benefit of it is that for Series 5, all of the models stayed in stock for the entire duration of the crowdfunding period. So you had a full 20 days to sign up for your model. So if you missed it, it was because you just weren't aware of it, which is a good thing, I guess, in our eyes, because we want to make sure that anyone that wanted a set was able to get it. It wasn't because they were at work and they couldn't get off, or they're at a position where they can't get away for a couple hours to go and order a set. So that's one thing that we've tried to adjust, is to make it more approachable, easier to get into. There will be a couple little changes to the website, so we'll remove the progress bars, because that's one of the things that caused some chaos, in a sense, is we weren't thinking about, well, if we adjust the numbers and all of a sudden the progress number's jumping around, and that creates confusion as well. So we'll remove that. It'll handle a lot more similar to what you will see on a normal checkout day or launch day on Lego.com. So we'll probably announce at the end where we ended up, so that way people have an idea of what the numbers are. But yeah, this way the progress bar jumping around won't confuse people. So all of a sudden it was 40,000, then it jumped to 50,000. People are wondering what's going on here. So it was just a limitation of the website. With that too, I mentioned a little bit earlier, we're doing a shortened crowdfunding period, so it'll be approximately 7 days. So that way we have additional time to plan for the variable volumes that we're working with. And then the last change that we've made as well is we get a lot of questions around what happens to all the canceled orders. There's 5 months in between when sets are pre-ordered and when they ship. And in that time, people move, people have a change of heart, their financial situations change, many different things happen. And so we do see some canceled sets, not a ton. And then we also have excess stock that we produce as a buffer in case any sets are lost or damaged during shipping, etc. And so once we get done with everything, well, because these are all crowdfunded at one time, there's no other way to get rid of that stock. And so what we've been piloting is a way to sell the excess stock that we have roughly 3 to 4 months after a series has fulfilled. And you saw that happen back in May with Series 1 and 2. We did that in the US. It was US and Canada. And that went really well. We didn't know how it was going to work, because a model might have 90 sets available, it might have 500. It's somewhere in there. And so there's so much variability, and also if there's a lot of demand for that, that'll sell way too fast for the infrastructure that's in place to be able to shut off immediately. So we wanted to see how that worked. It went really well. There was a couple little bugs, but then we also we started again to do the EMEA sales. So we did in Europe, in Eastern Europe and Western Europe, we just did Series 1 and 2 as well. It was last week. And that went a lot smoother, and so now we should be doing that moving forward as well. So there will technically be a second chance, although it is a very limited amount of volume, if any, exists for specific series. So later this year, you'll probably see another date for Series 3 models. We're working on also including APAC in that as well. For the first few series, there were maybe only like 9 sets, so it wasn't really feasible to do. But as we do that, we're increasing our buffer stock so that we also don't run into any other issues with fulfillment over the series. So, with that said, we can get into a couple of these models. These are Series 6 models. These are all crowdfunding on October 6th. We have Art Factory. Art Factory is $229. It is designed by Marcos Garavelli out of Spain. We have Sequoia Tree Trail. This goes for $269.99. That was designed by Daniel out of Canada. And then we have Outlaw Forest Den. This was designed by Sean out of Canada as well. This one is $229. And then we have Off-Road Adventures, designed by a repeat finalist, Josh Kingman. He's out of the US, and that one is $79.99. And then we have, this is Gold Mine Expedition. That is $299. This is designed by Thomas Carlier, or Brick Project, out of France. And so, with each of these models, I think this is probably one of our best series yet. Somehow each series keeps getting better and better and better. We've been really excited with how the whole series has been progressing. And every time we have our submission intake period, it started last Monday. It's like Christmas morning getting to watch all the wonderful new designs come out. So we're really excited to share the latest from Series 9 that should be coming out sometime shortly in mid-October. But feel free to come up, take a look at each of the models. And then in the other conference room, we also have Series 7 and Series 8 models in there. One thing that'll be interesting to note is those models are still prototype phase. So one of the things that we do is we have the initial model that's submitted by the fan designer, so we'll call that version 1. We'll work with the fan designers to refine the model. We take it through a modified version of the Lego design process, and then we end up with a version 2 model, which is what you will see over there. So it is not the exact final model that you will see. There's some things that will change, some things that we will modify. We'll start to adjust some of the minifigures and that kind of thing. But overall, you get a good semblance of what this model is going to end up looking like. And then what we would call these are our version 3 models. These are the final production models. So it'll be really interesting for, at least from a content perspective, all the models that are over in the other office, and then these models as well. There is no embargo date on them. They are all currently existing elements that are out in the wild. So there's no issue with photos or anything like that. But one of the really cool things that we can do is, because those are version 2 models, they're different than the photos that are currently online. So it'll be really interesting kind of to go through and see all the little changes that have been made. And then again, once the final models come out, to see how that model has progressed. Any questions for any of the models that we have up here, for BDP in general? I'm happy to answer them. Otherwise, I think we're probably coming up close on time. Cool. Ready?
Now that you are getting more involved in redesigning these sets and in kind of making them feel a bit more comfortable for the fans to actually put together, how would you say that your team's approach differs from, say, the Lego Ideas team and what they're doing, which is a very similar kind of program?
You know, I don't really know the other approach. Our because I came in new to how we do our process, I've never really been through the model design process within the Lego group, so I don't know that I could really comment on that. It is, I would think that it's quite different in the sense that we are leading, it is the fan driving 100% of it, and then we are kind of commenting and saying, you can do, yes, we could do that, no, we can't do that. There's not a lot of limitations outside of, as long as the technique is legal, it's not overly stressing an element. There's you know, the build flow of it is repeatable, you know, especially when it comes to foliage. Probably foliage is the number one thing where we have a lot of back and forth on, because it's, you know, when you're going through and trying to assemble some of the trees, you got to make sure when you put one piece on, 4 other pieces aren't falling off, right? So, yeah, we still try to let them be 100% in the driver's seat for that.
So is it a case of you saying this part needs to be changed for this reason, this part needs to be changed, and then the fan makes a new kind of version of that or redesigns it?
In a sense, yes. Yeah, so it might not be a specific part. There are times where, like, let's say, example, a part might be leaving production. And so we might say, okay, well, we can no longer use this element because it's not going to be in production anymore by the time that we're going to go into manufacture. But other than that, it's usually, you know, let's look at the roof of this vehicle isn't stable when we're putting it on. Maybe we need to look at everything around it to see how do separate elements interact, or maybe you change the how it attaches entirely. You know, does the windscreen stay attached versus separating from the top? We'll give them a couple different ideas. For here's you know, 1 or 2 ways that we might fix it, but you can use these as ideas to address the change yourself. So that way it still stays their design, right? Because I think that's the most important thing, is it stays their model.
I'm curious if you could speak to what went into the decision-making for what LEGO original IPs can and cannot be used for this. I know it specifically states you can't use stuff like Ninjago, Dreams, Friends, Monkey Kids, Brickheads, or Modulars. But does that imply that other original LEGO IPs, like obviously you have the Vintage Castle sub-themes that have been making a return in CMFs and sets, that's all okay. Does it also imply that other older IPs, like say for example Bionicle or something like that, could be an idea that could be seen?
You could do it. Kind of the loose rule is it in active development?
Yep.
So for example, I think the internal IP that is listed there is a yearly release for that. Right, so we're going to, you know, kind of stay out of that space. So, for example, you'll see that's where modulars isn't on there, because there is a new modular every year. Winter Village is probably one of those things too, where it's like we should probably stay away from that. I don't think I've ever seen any Lunar New Year sets, but you know, that would kind of fall in that there is a yearly release, even though it is not a specific theme, right? It's kind of more of a sub theme. Where the line kind of gets a little blurry is, you have Castle. Castle, there are obviously releases for Castle, but they're a little bit more farther in between. You know, we're seeing them maybe every couple of years or something like that. Same with Pirate. So those just depend on if there's something coming down the pipeline, then we'll stay clear of that and try to avoid that. But that's where I also tell fan designers, the purpose of this program is not to do what the core portfolio is doing. It's to do the niche things that wouldn't be viable in the core portfolio, or maybe things that enhance the core portfolio. So you would see something like Siege Encampment from Series 4 is a perfect example of, you know, it's a, to reduce it as much as you can, it's a $200 battle pack, right? Sense of, but what it does is it really makes the Line 9 Castle that much better, right? Because it goes hand in hand with it. It could also technically be used with Mountain Fortress as well, but that's kind of more of the direction that we try to advise into. So that way you are not putting all this effort into something that should be core portfolio.
Can you talk a little bit about the process for people to submit ideas and what they get out of it, or what the benefit is beyond it just being produced as a model?
So, yeah, I think one of the biggest benefits to it is as we go through the design process, we're providing a lot of feedback. So even if you are not a finalist, you still have the ability to request feedback, and so we're working very closely with each individual fan designer. They must solicit feedback. We don't want to just come out and be like, hey, you need to do this on your model or do that. If you are approaching us and you would like help, that's where we will come through and we'll help coach up some of our fan designers that are maybe newer to digital brick building, or to model making and the instruction aspect of it. Because the other part of this that is challenging is you have to make you have to make the actual instructions for the models, and that is a whole nother type of process that many people don't have. So at the end of the day, it's the education, I would say, is, you know, we're trying to provide a fulfilling process or reward for you if you are participating. And then I guess there is probably some benefit too in that when you're done with the model at the end of the day, if you're not selected as a finalist, you still have instructions ready to go. So there are a lot of people that request and say, hey, can you share instructions for this? And so that creates further engagement.
So for people that get picked, do they get any profit sharing from this?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. So fan designers that are selected as finalists, they get 5% of sales. And then there is 5 copies of each set. There's some other little ancillary things that come along with it, but those are the 2 big ticket. Yeah. How are we on
I
time?
think we're at time.
All right.
Thank you so much.
Yep. Thank you.